Welcome to the Breas Vivo 65 tutorial series. In this video, we will be going through the Setup menu, which can be accessed by selecting the second function button. Pressing Setup will allow you to view the settings for the current treatment mode, which is indicated at the top left of the screen. By using the up and down navigation keys, you can navigate through the menu to different settings. Changes are made to individual settings by using the left and right navigation keys. Any changes to settings will take immediate effect and do not need further confirmation. All the settings displayed in the Setup section will be relevant to the treatment mode that is in use. When in a pressure ventilation mode, these settings may include the inspiratory pressure, which is an absolute setting and not a pressure above the PEEP value, the PEEP setting, the rise time settings. This is a function that allows you to adjust the speed at which the air is delivered to the patient. In the pressure ventilation modes, this can be set from the fastest setting of 1 to the slowest setting of 9. The patient's trigger settings for spontaneous breaths. The inspiratory trigger setting allows you to set a sensitivity of 1 to 9 or off. The higher the number, the lower the sensitivity of the trigger, with 1 being the most sensitive and 9 being the least sensitive. In a pressure support mode, the expiratory trigger can be adjusted, which allows you to match the patient's breathing cycle as closely as possible to allow for a smooth expiration. A setting of 1 would require a 10% drop in peak flow to cycle into the expiratory phase. This can be set up to 9, which requires a drop of 90% of peak flow to cycle. So the higher the trigger setting, the harder the trigger effort for the patient. The inspiratory time settings, which vary depending on the mode in use. The minimum and maximum inspiratory time are important. During pressure support, the patient has the control of initiation and cycling of a breath. With these settings, we can help with the synchrony of the patient and ventilator. For example, if the patient is cycling too quickly, you can set the minimum inspiration time to make sure the patient gets at least a minimum volume of air from each breath. The maximum inspiratory time can be used to make sure the ventilator doesn't prevent the patient from being able to exhale effectively, or to make sure you give the patient enough time to exhale completely. The patient can trigger a cycle at any point between these two values. They simply tell the ventilator you want at least a minimum delivery time and stop it from going beyond a set maximum. A mandatory backup breath rate. The backup rate is relevant where we expect spontaneous breathing effort from the patient. If the Vivo 65 fails to detect a spontaneous breath rate above the set backup rate, it will initiate a backup breath from the ventilator. When using pressure ventilation modes, there are target volume setting options. You may set a target volume setting and minimum and maximum inspiratory pressure settings, which allows a pressure range for the ventilator to work within to achieve its target volume. The pressure will fluctuate up or down in 0.5 centimeters of water increments, reacting to the achieved tidal volume of the previous breath. The backup inspiratory time will be used to define the length of inspiration for each mandatory backup breath. In a volume control mode, the tidal volume setting will define the volume of air that will be delivered to the patient at every breath. When using the Simv mode, the settings look very much like the ones we've described previously. Note that there is no breath rate setting in Simv, but instead you will set an Simv rate, which will define the number of mandatory breaths the patient will receive. In between the mandatory breaths, the patient is free to trigger more breaths. These breaths will be delivered at the set support pressure, defining the peak inspiratory pressure the ventilator will reach for the patient's spontaneously triggered breaths. Finally, please note that on this settings menu, we are on page 1 of 2. This is indicated at the top of the settings page, next to the time display. To go to the second page, simply press the Setup button again, and it will change pages. In this instance, it takes you to the PSI rate settings. Pressing the Setup button again will return you to page 1. This concludes the Setup menu tutorial for the Breas Vivo 65. For more information, please visit the Education by Breas website. Thank you for watching.